Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We're hearing testimony from Deputy Douglas Kowalski. Looks like he was a patrol officer and he did a felony stop apparently on James Colley. We assume this was before the murders, likely due to the restraining order that his wife had placed on him, his wife Amanda, who is now dead. He's actually charged in her murder. Still with me in studio, Ashley Willcott. And Ashley, we talked about this prior to coming on the air. This order of protection, these protection orders, I've seen them in my days of policing. You've seen them, of course, as a trial attorney and judge. We all know that it's basically a piece of paper that really means nothing. So if you get an order of protection, it's great. It's good to have that legal piece of it, but it doesn't stop things like this from happening. What do you say about that?
I would agree with you. And so, Vincent, the problem is that no piece of paper can physically prevent someone from attacking someone else or committing a crime against someone else. And so it is the best we can do to say, call the police, and they're going to keep that person away from you. But it doesn't mean that somebody can't commit a crime against you. It just can't prevent that altogether.
Well, yeah, and part of the problem, too, is it takes time for police to respond, right? They have to be dispatched. They have to be in the area. They have to get there.
Right.
So it's not a quick response time when you're talking about these orders of protection. It's you got to get dispatched. Someone has to be in the area. They have to get there. And usually, in my experience, by the time that happens, the suspect is long gone in this situation.
Right. Not only that, but I think the other piece that I've heard from victims who don't get killed is that they find out that the person isn't going to be stopped by a piece of paper. If they really want to hurt someone, if they really are this angry and want to commit a crime against them, a piece of paper is never going to stop them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are ready to go back into the courtroom, so let's get back into court here in Florida. Sorry about that. We're not going back to the courtroom, but actually, to your point, you're absolutely right. A piece of paper doesn't stop anything, right? I mean, yeah, it's great to have it, but that doesn't mean if the order of protection is against me that I'm actually going to follow that, because in most states, at least in my experience, you violate order of protection, it's 5 to 10 days in jail.
That's right.
Then you have 5 to 10 days to sit there and stew and get upset about this order of protection, which you feel is bogus or you may feel it's not warranted, but it doesn't do anything, because 5 to 10 days in jail, what does that solve? It doesn't calm that anger.
I think what the goal is for it to be a cooling off period, right, Vincent? And so that's the time during which, that's the goal. Is that going to happen? No, I don't believe it necessarily is going to. You know, the other piece in this specific case is there was testimony that that morning there'd been a hearing, and this defendant was furious after that hearing. And so I guess you think through that and think, well, there's a restraining order, he's furious, that's a lethal combination.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I don't know how I feel about restraining orders personally. I've never had one on me, but we have to do better. I mean, there were signs here that could have protected Amanda. There were signs here that could have protected her friend. This could have gone a lot better. I'm not faulting the police. Again, they have to get dispatched. They have to get there. But I understand the law. I understand restraining orders. But we have to do better. We have to be able to protect these victims. He's also charged with several other counts. Again, 2 counts of attempted murder, some burglary charges to a dwelling. I believe he shared the house with his wife Amanda at one point, but he wasn't living there at the time. So that in lies the burglary charge. And this is a death penalty case. And you know, if he's convicted, I think the state will push for the death penalty immediately. What say you?
Right, and there are a lot of red flags. All of those other crimes he's been charged with are the things that lead up to the type of murder that he's committed or allegedly committed and that he's on trial for now.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to go to a quick break. Again, we're following the James Colley murder trial. In Florida, he's charged with the murder of his wife and her best friend, and the attempted murder of a individual. His wife was having a relationship and one of her friends. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We've been listening to testimony from a CSI tech. Still with me in studio, Ashley Willcott, and this is crucial testimony because these are the people, of course, that investigate crime scenes. So I'm sure the jury is very anxious to see what this crime scene tech has to say. They're doing a sidebar right now in court, but Ashley, explain how crucial testimony from a CSI tech is.
Absolutely. So, Vincent, you'll see that the prosecution is having each witness testify that is specifically saying how they were involved in the crime scene or what they did at the crime scene. And so, as a result, this particular person is going to say, here's what we did once we actually got into the crime scene. And it's my understanding, based on previous testimony, that this person can describe where the gun was that was found at the scene, where the body was that was found at the scene, and any other elements necessary to prove what crime happened, how it happened, and how the prosecutor can connect this particular defendant to the particular crime.
Right, and it's very important, but we all know as a defense attorney, the defense is going to drill into anything that is CSI tech or anything that anybody involved in that crime scene will say. We all know that. It looks like we are back live in the courtroom, if I am understanding correctly. Let's get back into the court. Hey, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We're still hearing testimony from Sean Valmar, CSR tech, that processed the scene there. He mentioned a .45 caliber box that was found in the bedroom closet, which I think will be crucial in this case because I believe James Colley is accused of leaving with the .45. I know there was a 9mm found in the room where his wife Amanda was shot. But I want to switch gears from talking about the .45 caliber box. Still with me in studio, Ashley Willcott. I want to talk, Ashley, about this Ambien defense. And I'm not an expert on pills by any means. I don't even take aspirin when I have a headache. But do you know anything about Ambien, and more importantly, the side effects of Ambien? Because we heard this in Roseanne Barr, right? She said she sent those racist tweets because she was on Ambien and that was her excuse. But do you know anything about Ambien and how it relates to the body?
Sure. So it's the infamous Ambien defense, right? And so they've said and come out and said that Ambien causes bad behavior or causes behaviors that you may not expect or remember that you did. So some examples that we hear in the media are things like you may go to the refrigerator and eat while you're actually sleepwalking and you don't remember doing it the next morning. But I think that the hurdle that any defense attorney is going to have is to make that leap and say the bad behavior actually resulted in criminal actions like killing two people and shooting them after you've gone to the house with the loaded guns looking for someone and then killing two people. So I don't know that the Ambien defense is one that really can be used to argue somebody didn't commit murder. I will say that different juries have used or considered this defense by defendants who have been accused of crimes, and there have been mixed results. Some juries have convicted defendants regardless of the even proven use of Ambien or being on Ambien at the time the crime was committed, and there are some who have actually reduced charges or found that the charges should not go forward on defendants.
Yeah, you know, what's always interesting, I always, listen to these types of cases, and again, I don't take medicine, but you have to think that in this case, James went to the house. He knew his wife was there. He knew her boyfriend was there, the other friends. He actually sought out the boyfriend in this case. So at some point, I would assume that even if you're under the influence of an intoxicant, that you would snap into reality to say, hey, this is wrong, because again, you have to drive to the scene, you have to go inside the home, you have to break inside the home. So there's a lot of time that went by where I think James could have snapped back into reality in this case, but unfortunately he didn't. Two people are deceased, and James Colley is on trial right now for that in Florida. Again, this is a death penalty case. We've been hearing testimony all day, and we are going to get back into the courtroom and hear more from Sean Valmar, CSI Tech. Welcome back to Law and Crime. Sean Valmar is still on the stand. He's a CSI tech who worked the crime scene in the death of Amanda Colley. Right now, her husband, James Colley, is on trial for that murder. Still with me, of course, Ashley Willcott. Ashley, we're hearing crucial testimony here by this CSI tech. He's laying it out. He mentioned how he found two bodies, one in the closet, one in the bathroom. A gun was recovered near each body. Cell phones were recovered by the body. So that tells me maybe they were attempting to call 911. We don't know. Maybe they were trying to get help. But this is very crucial testimony that's going on right now, and I think it's going to point the finger to James Colley as being the suspect in this case, especially when we start talking DNA that was recovered from those weapons and things of that nature. What say you?
So in terms of a criminal investigation, Vincent, what an incredible scene to have, because when you just pointed out there are two guns that were allegedly used in the course of these shootings that were left at the scene with the two individuals. He testified as to a little bit of blood splatter, and I suspect we're going to hear a whole lot more about that.
Right.
That is evidence as to how it occurred, where they were standing, etc. The cell phones are going to be evidence. So in terms of a perfect crime scene, so to speak, for the prosecution, this one's great.
Absolutely. And you know what else it tells me, Ashley? It tells me this was a crime of passion, because there was no thought going into this crime. You leave two guns at the crime scene. You leave just about all the evidence there. It tells me this was a crime of passion, and his father has already stated that at that hearing that day over the order of protection, he was furious about this order of protection. So I think it just paints the picture for what happened inside that home back in 2015 by leaving the guns, by not trying to clean up the crime scene, by just being as reckless as he was.
I would argue that, and that he had some type of rage, or that there was some reason he was so furious he couldn't control himself, and he left the mess and off he went and took off to another state.
Yeah, he left a very big mess. That's a great point, Ashley. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and hear more testimony from CSI Tech Sean Balmer in the James Colley murder case. He's on trial right now for the death of his wife and her best friend. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back here on the Law and Crime Network. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We're still hearing live testimony from CSI Tech Sean Balmer in this case, but I want to switch gears, Ashley, and talk about something that you and I were discussing during this testimony. Now, we've heard where the bodies were found. We heard that there was a cell phone next to Amanda's body, so that tells me she was trying to call 911. But one of the things we heard earlier in testimony, that there were live rounds found in the backyard, live rounds in shell casings. So that tells me, and I don't want to speculate, but that tells me as an investigator that he was actually there loading a firearm while watching what's going on in that house. He was lying in wait. So it goes back to the ambient defense, and there you can see the defendant there on the screen. It goes back to the ambient defense. He's lying in wait. He's loading live rounds into this gun while watching everything in the house. So I don't know how this defense is going to go for this guy.
Right, and so as a lawyer, I would say it's premeditated. If he's taken all of those positive steps to actually have the guns, load them, watch what's going on, to enter the house, to then shoot people, I think defense will have a very hard time winning an ambient defense. Bad behaviors, eating out of the refrigerator, sure, but that kind of premeditation and then killing two people, I don't think defense is going to win on that.
I don't think so either. It's one thing to blame Ambien for a racist tweet, but it's totally different to blame it on two murders and two attempted murders. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to get back into the courtroom, hear more testimony from this CSI Tech Sean Balmer. I expect that testimony to be quite long, because processing a crime scene is a long process, but the jury needs to hear it to paint this picture of what happened inside that house. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. Much more to come here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. It looks like testimony of Sean Balmer, the CSI Tech, is about to end there. Ashley, we were talking during the testimony here, the issue of the order of protection, the issue of the guns, how many guns were used on the scene, and we both came up with the same thing. I wonder if this guy's been convicted of domestic violence in the past, because according to the Lautenberg Amendment, if you're convicted of domestic violence, you cannot possess, own a firearm. But it goes back to the conversation that everyone has in this nation, gun control. So let's say he was convicted. How do investigators, how do police, how does the state go in and get those guns? So, A, I'd be curious to know, had he been convicted of domestic violence before? If he has, how come that hasn't occurred where those guns were taken out of the house.
Right, and so I think that goes hand in hand with the issues in this case, which is there are so many red flags in this case. I cannot imagine that the wife and or some of the other people involved in this case didn't fear or suspect that this exact thing might happen, and she may be a victim. That's why she had the restraining order. But the question becomes, was he allowed to have the guns or not? And like you said, even if he's allowed to have the guns, there are no mechanisms in place to ensure that he actually doesn't have them or get them illegally. So there are a lot of questions to be answered around that, to look at this as what do we do in the real world to prevent this from happening again.
Absolutely, and that's always the #1 debate in this country, gun control. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back to the Florida courtroom. Again, James Colley is on trial right now for the murder of his wife and her friend and the attempted murder of 2 other people. Stay tuned. We got a lot more to come on the Law and Crime Network. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. That was testimony from earlier today from Rachel Hendricks. She is one of the surviving victims in this shooting that killed Amanda Colley and her friend Lindy Dobbins. And still with me, Ashley Willcott. Ashley, we heard here how basically everyone was running through this house hiding like they were being hunted. And to a jury, that has to be very telling testimony for people to actually imagine what was going on inside that home. And you heard Rachel say, he asked several times, where is he? Where is he? So it sounds like this Lamar Dobley was the intended target because he was having a relationship with James' wife, albeit they were separated at that time, albeit there was a restraining order, but he's having a relationship with her. And as a man, that's not something any man takes lightly.
Right. So, boy, first of all, this witness is a great witness for the prosecution because, like you've already said, Vincent, her description made me fear. It made me feel like here's somebody who comes with a gun. We have to run to escape. 2 of the individuals, I think she said Lindy and Amanda, are the 2 that ran into the house, that there was some crouched next to a chest, and we all know what happened next. 2 of them ended up dead. So that's terrifying. So this type of witness who is actually a surviving victim pulls the jury's emotions in, and that weighs in favor of the prosecution. Now, the other thing I would say quickly is in terms of the individual she was allegedly seeing and him being the victim, there has been other testimony as well as hers that he says, where is he, where is he? And so I think that I understand his testimony was he got out of the house, but you have to wonder, was he really the intended victim? Because if so, would this person have shot this many other people?
Well, with the history of domestic violence, we never know. And what I found most telling about this is Lindy, one of the victims, actually called 911. We're going to take a quick break here at the Law and Crime Network. Go get some coffee. Stay tuned. We have a lot more to cover. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned on the Law and Crime Network. Hey, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. All day we've been covering day 1 of the James Colley murder trial. He's on trial right now for the murder of his wife, Amanda, and her friend, Lindsay Dobbins. There were actually 2 other people inside that home on that fateful day. They actually escaped. We just heard previous testimony from Rachel Hendricks. She is one of the surviving victims. Also, Lamar Dobley was inside that home. He was having a relationship with Amanda Colley at the time, and apparently that set James into a whirlwind because he was asking, where's he at? So, Ashley, before we hear testimony from James Dobley, you and I have been talking about this guy throughout the day. Don't know how we quite feel about him. You know, we've questioned, why did he leave the home? He was the man, I guess you could say, on the scene, so why did he run out? And you know, we don't know how we would act in that situation. It's easy to say, yes, I would have done this, I would have done that, but we don't know how we'd act in that situation.
I agree. There's no way to know until you're in it, and God forbid any of us are ever in this situation. But I will say, having heard the testimony of the one surviving victim, and now we're going to hear it from him, it will paint an even better, more descriptive picture of what must this scene have been like. I mean, again, I can't even imagine, and the chaos and the fear and the number of guns and the number of shots and the rounds and the running and all of that. So I think we'll get a better idea after we hear his testimony again.
In the hiding in the closet. Let's get to previous testimony from Lamar Dubberly. Again, he was inside the home on the day of the shooting. He was having a relationship with Amanda Colley, one of the victims in this case. Take a listen to what he had to say earlier today. Hey, welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. We were hearing testimony from Lamar Dubberly. He is one of the surviving victims in this shooting where James Colley is on trial right now for the death of his wife, Amanda Colley, and her friend, Lindy Dobbins. Ashley is still here with me. And Ashley, you and I were talking, listening to this testimony, and there were several red flags that went off to both you and I, especially me as an investigator. He testified that she FaceTimed him to show that the place was ransacked. Then he called police, but he called a non-emergency number. Then he calls Lindy Dobbins, who ended up being a victim in this, and then he goes to the scene. So my biggest question was, A, why didn't he tell her to get out of the house? Because in a burglary situation, even if you suspect that it's James, get out of the house. You don't know if he's still there. You don't know what his intentions are. So I think he should have told her to get out of the house, and I think he should have told her to call 911, and definitely don't send Lindy over to that scene without knowing it's clear. Right.
So hindsight's 20/20, and we can all admit that. But I think your point is so well taken that, especially in circumstances where you have domestic violence, a restraining order, you don't play. When you come in, your house has been burglarized, ransacked, you don't know what end is up, you call the police and you get out of the house. I would say, I'm not going back. I'm not going to go back to that house because I don't know what he's going to do or try to do. So it is astounding in retrospect, and it doesn't mean anyone deserved to get hurt by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think moving forward for educational purposes, people need to be very aware. This is why we have law enforcement. They're well trained to deal with this. Call them, call them, call them, call them.
I think had that call come in as a 911, it would have been a burglary in progress. You would have had a code 3. That means blue lights and sirens. So if James was at that house at that time and he heard these sirens coming, he would have got it out of that house, out of the area, and possibly, just possibly, we don't know, but possibly his wife would be alive right now. Lindy would be alive right now. We wouldn't be having this trial, but I think there were a lot of red flags here. We really don't know. Again, we don't want to speculate, but as an investigator, I would advise anyone, call 911, get out of the home. We've been following this case all day. Again, this is the James Colley murder trial in Florida. He's on trial right now for killing his wife, Amanda, her friend, Lindy Dobbins. We will also be covering this tomorrow as court resumes, but also we'll be back in Atlanta, Georgia. Leon Williams is on trial right now for the murder of his adoptive son, Kente Williams. He adopted that child just a few years ago. So he's on trial right now for that murder, felony murder, malice murder, child endangerment. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Ashley Willcott for joining me here in the studio. We will see you here tomorrow on the Law&Crime Network. Good night.